Hello, welcome to this week's meeting. I think Jesse was having problems with this connection, so we're just going to have it on YouTube today, and you can watch it and digest it and talk about it later in the Slack or in other ways. So, thank you for watching. We have a bunch of things going on. This is our first meeting since 2 weeks ago, so last week we were at various meetings. We were at the Envision meeting at Princeton. It was virtual, but Jesse and I attended, and there was a lot of content. It was about futurism. It was about solving social problems and various things. And I prepared a lecture on, or a presentation on the lab, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We also attended the New York Celebration of Women in Computing. That was Jesse's presentation, and that was done in a virtual environment that they had as a meeting space. I think it was in Gathertown. In any case, it was a pretty good time. It was a pretty successful presentation. Thank you to everyone who participated in that. It looks like at least 6 or 7 people participated in that presentation. And so there's no video recording of that, but Jesse said at some point he'd like to make a recording of it and post it to YouTube. So we'll be going over the YouTube channel. There are a number of new videos on there in a little bit. But I'd like to start with the Slack review. So I'll share my screen and we'll get started. So, a lot of things going on this week. It was a very robust set of conversations that we had. Why don't we start out with the general channel? The first thing we had, let's see, where did we start? We've had 2 weeks to review, so we want to go back maybe to this point. So we have a lot of things that get posted in the channel. Sometimes we follow up on them, sometimes we don't. Erin, who was at, I think, the last meeting 2 weeks ago, we got into a robust discussion about cultural evolution, culture, and she posted something on Crows Understand Analogies. So this is animal cultural learning, animal learning. And she's got some other posts here. This is a nice book, Other Minds, The Octopus and the Evolution of Intelligent Life by Peter Gottfried Smith, and Bacteria to Bachenbach by Daniel Dennett. So those are good papers. Some replies to that. Yeah, everyone enjoyed that. And so we have another post by Erin on like a cell model of schizophrenia, so a neuronal model of schizophrenia. And then we have this post. This is the program for New York Celebration of Women in Computing. So this was the actual program. This is now completed, but it was a pretty robust discussion. And of course, Jesse presented the lab's work on this. So there was actually quite a bit of interest in this work. We had a couple people request the slides, and like I said, we'll be making a recording of this at some point in the near future. So this was at 4:45, not yesterday, but the Friday previous. Rashab posted a sensory motor super lab reading list. So this is the super lab in, I think it's Western University. In Ontario, and they have a number of different things. Well, this is their reading list for, I think, the week. So this is something that it's a super lab. It's a bunch of labs that come together, and more than 20 trainees and PIs contributed to this list. So this is something we might actually do. I know we're doing this with the Zotero, but that's not as robust. This would be kind of a nice thing. Let's take a look at this reading list. Okay, so this is just like a bunch of papers that they're recommending and they're putting into this list. One way you could do this, another way you could do this would be to have like an annotated bibliography, where you'd have a paper, you'd read a little bit about it, describe it, and then maybe we could hyperlink it together. In our lab we have this ethos of, we have a bunch of different projects, but those projects are interconnected. So how are they interconnected? And then this is a place maybe where we could do this. So I think it's an interesting idea. I haven't talked to Rashab about this. It's just kind of like something that I saw. I'm going to give a thumbs up to that. If Rashab is watching, of course, we can talk about this more later offline. This is an article by Aaron. The foundations of AI are riddled with errors. So this is about... we have Krishna here.
Hello.
Hello, Krishna. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay. Thanks for coming in, and I'm going through the Slack review now, so...
Great.
Okay. Let's see. If you have any questions, you can ask. I'm just going through the channels here. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Neuromatch, but we can come to it later.
Oh, yeah, we'll be talking about that in a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the foundations of AI are riddled with errors. This is basically saying that a lot of the image data sets that we use in AI, the labels are incorrect. And so if that means labels are incorrect if we use supervised learning, that's kind of a problem. And so it's, I never really thought about that before, but it's an interesting thing to consider. If our labels are wrong, then, we're getting bad training and then bad results. So that's something that, you have to think about it like people are annotating these databases, and sometimes the labels could be vague or wrong, and they have a similar problem in systems biology where you have genes, and then people have annotated the genes, but the annotations a lot of times are very vague or sometimes incorrect. They're just based on like experiments. Sometimes they're based on just what people think they are, what their function is, and so the annotations need to be sort of worked out. And of course, if you're trying to train a model and you have maybe classifications that they're somewhat subjective. So we think of a horse as a horse, but language is not made to be like this exact, putting an exact label on an image. There are a lot of aspects to that image that might be like you might have a horse embedded in a background, you might have other things going on in the image. So it's really something that we might think more about in this group. Some questions about GSOC. This is what happened with the allostasis machines paper. So this is a week that we needed to send a finished camera-ready version to the workshop and also send a recorded talk. So we were working on that this week, and we got both of those completed. And Rashab is interested in doing a second version of this paper. Right now it's in sort of a IEEE format workshop version, so it's maybe about 6 pages in that format. So Rashab is talking about expanding it, maybe adding in an analysis of some type, maybe something having to do with reinforcement learning. And I said that would be great, let's put it together. So I think he's in the process of that now, but that's something that we can talk about later. And Daniela was approving that version, so the workshop is on May 15th, so it's coming up in a couple weeks, and that's something that I'm registered for. I don't know if anyone else is registered for, but we'll go there. And I think the workshop is mainly to give comments on the like people are going to view the talks early, and then they're going to come to the workshop and discuss it. And then we have this, let's see, So Jesse was asking about where are resources for. We've done a lot of work in the lab on culture, and we haven't talked about it as much as we should have in the past, but we do have like a fair amount of work on cultural evolution and culture. I have been reworking the Representational Brains and Phenotypes website to reflect this a little bit. I don't have it up right now, but it's if you go there, you go to the menus, and it should be in one of the menus, and I've been rewording it. I want to work on it a little bit more, but I haven't had a chance to finish it. But we're trying to advertise our work, and I think that it needs to be, because it needs to be updated. So there's this Podchaser podcast, Culture Innovation and the Collective Brain by Many Minds. So this is a nice podcast. You might want to listen to it. Okay, here it is. This is where I was looking. I told Jesse that we have this new page on the Representational Brains and Phenotypes website. So this is our project website underneath the lab website. And this has our publications on something called cultural data science. I mean, that's the term I've come up with. And it looks like we have a couple papers. We have papers from the past on the contextual geometric structures work. We also have stuff I've done with Hrishikesh Kulkarni, who is interested in machine learning and culture. And so we have a number of papers there. And so we're going to be adding to this. I think we're going to be ramping this up a bit in the next year, because I think there's interest in it. So I'll get back to the Neuromatch Academy in a minute. There's this Machine Learning, the Great Stagnation. This is an article that Rashab pulled up. I can't remember who wrote this. I think it was, let's see, the discussion on this. This is the article, and then he put in an interview by Peter Thiel on something similar. And then I mentioned to Rashab that in established fields, sometimes, a lot of times, especially in CS, fields will evolve to the point of where all they're doing is just kind of fiddling with their models. That's the only thing that they do in the whole field. And then they evaluate the models on like fractions of a percent of performance increase. And so, you can either do that and be happy or not be happy and move on to another field. And so we talked about that. This argument in this Peter Thiel video is more meta. He argues current institutions and research have become more homogeneous. Yeah, I mean it's a common argument that people have made over the years, but so we can talk more about that later. And then finally the Neuromatch Academy. So yeah, Krishna. So the Neuromatch Academy, and this is Jesse putting this in the channel. The applications are now open for this, and so this year they're doing 2 tracks. They're doing a computational neuroscience track, which is in July, like last year, and they're also doing a deep learning track, which is in August. And the deep learning track is new.
I was interested in the neuroscience track because I have experience in machine learning, so I think it would be redundant to learn all the stuff again. Yeah. But yeah, I was very excited about the neuroscience stuff.
Yeah. So if you want to participate, I guess you just go to the application page. I don't know if Jesse put it in here. Okay. So we'll be making like pre-course like we did the last year. I made some tutorials last year. So we're making something so that people can have a head start. Yeah, I think so. So, hi Jesse, how are you?
Hi Jesse.
Hey, I'll be fully at my computer in a couple minutes.
All right.
I'm sorting out some internet stuff and other things here today. So.
Okay.
All right.
So, Krishna was asking about Neuromatch. So my understanding is that, what we did last year was we did like a prep session, which brought in a lot of people. And then we talked about, I guess we just did like something in Keybase, actually. So it was like a set of discussion channels with some lectures, and that was all right, but I don't know. And then we did this sort of supplemental thing during Neuromatch, where I would give lectures on different topics that were sort of allied. So, I had one on Bayesian thinking, which wasn't really what they were, and that was above and beyond what they were learning in the summer school. And then another talk on information theory, and another talk on, I can't remember, agent-based models. So, we have this sort of supplemental role to play here. In addition, we also did projects. We did a project on Cybernetics, which is something that we actually talked about yesterday. But it's something, we can do different things sort of to supplement the summer school. But the summer school itself is like run by Neuromatch, and the weekly meetings during that time are just going to be like people coming in and discussing some things from the summer school, and then maybe some supplemental things. So we kind of keep it like oriented towards that. In terms of the summer school, I know Jesse went last year. We have a number of other people went, and they've open sourced all their material, so you can look online to see what the sort of the syllabus is like. But I think the one thing you can benefit from is a project where you get to do you get to work with. There are a couple of data sets that they have, and they're neuroimaging data sets, or I think single cell recordings, and you can actually work with those, and you build a project where you do some analysis. It's you do it in like 3 or 4 weeks, so I don't know how big the analysis should be. It shouldn't be very big, but it just should be something that you can do and show that you can work with those type of data. So
yeah.
Did you want to? Did you have any other questions about it, or?
No, thanks. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so we'll be talking more about that in coming weeks. So let's keep our let's keep that at the front of our minds here. I don't remember what else we had. Events news. We had a number of things. There's this call for papers. Do you work on AI, ML plus HCI? There's a new journal special issue here with a virtual workshop. People expressed interest in that. There's some other things in here. Okay, this is the one that I had. So the Princeton Envision Conference was last weekend, and I prepared this talk on the lab. And so it's about 45 minutes long. And if you watch this, you'll understand kind of the philosophy behind the lab, what we're doing currently. And I've profiled a couple of people here. I didn't play favorites. I just picked people who I wanted to highlight who did different things. So Stefan Dvoretsky, Hrishikesh Kulkarni, Jesse, Rob Stone, who does the cybernetics work, and Shruti, who's a newer member who's doing stuff with AI ethics and some machine learning stuff. So, just giving those people as an example of what you can do here. A lot of people like this. Rashab, Jesse, Danielle, and Krishna all like this presentation. So if you haven't seen it yet, watch it. There's some other events in the channel here. I'll let you read those on your own. I'm not sure if we have anything else really of note. We open chat forum channel. We have a couple of papers in here. We have some things about...
I posted a lot on Open Chat this week, so apologies for that. But a lot of them were updates about Dizzy and then my summer of data stuff, which I might talk about a little bit later. But there's a lot of... I really encourage people to use Open Chat, just because if you don't really know where to put something, you don't have a fully fleshed out idea, just go ahead and throw it in there, and we can talk about it and see it. I did that. I did that a lot this week. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this is great. This is a lot of stuff to review in here. So we have, the Dizzy is the diverse. Is it diverse minds or I can't remember.
I think it's Diverse Intelligences Summer Institute.
Okay. And it looks like there are going to be a lot of good people here. Mike Levin and Melanie Mitchell and Judith Fan and let's see.
Yeah, I was quite surprised that I honestly didn't. I don't know if I just didn't look at their faculty very well or it wasn't there, but like I just sort of like I saw the institute and I saw a few people there like, oh, that's really cool, and then I applied to it, and I know Rashad was super interested into it, and like I said to him, you know, it kind of feels like it's very similar to the intelligence embodiment workshop, where it just sort of was this thing that I had no background about, and oh yeah, I'll apply to this, why not? It's really my interest. And then you show up, and then it's like, oh, like there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's funny because I mentioned there are other people that are at the institute or whatever, but Judy Fan is someone that I mentioned a lot, and someone who I really like her work at San Diego. Levin keeps coming up in all these papers that we talk about, and Melanie Mitchell is, she's been talking about it a lot here as well. So it's just sort of funny to see those three, and then just a sense of, oh, well, there's a whole lot of stuff going on at this. It's a very interesting community, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so, I mean, go through this channel and you'll see there are a lot of things in here that you might want to follow up on. And then finally, this virtual reality channel, we've renamed this virtual reality neurotech. So there's stuff on virtual reality, but also on a number of other types of, like wrist-based myoelectric current sensor for AR, VR control, which is, part of virtual reality, but it goes a little bit farther afield. So, the idea is just to, get some discussions going in that area as well. So that's all for our Slack review for the week. I'd like to also now make a quick plug for the YouTube channel. We have a number of things on here. So we have the Distributed Enabling Computational Laboratory, which is a talk. It's about 45 minutes long. This is on the lab, and it's sort of current state. I made a talk on this in, I think, October of 2019, and I revisited it for the Princeton Envision, and I couldn't believe how much things had changed from what we were doing then. So I'd updated it quite a bit and then made a presentation on it. So this is going to be dated probably in another year and a half. So this is the allostasis machines. So I made a long version of this, which is about 30 minutes long, and that's for it's like the whole thing that I wanted to put together. It has a lot of things about sort of the complex systems precursors of allostasis machines, and then some use cases, and it's all sort of a longer version that maps to the paper quite well. But then I have a shorter version of about 9 minutes, and that's just the use cases. So maybe some of the people at the workshop just want to know about the use cases. So we have, like, what I've done is I've taken these GIFs that I found online, and I kind of describe these different use cases for, we have sensory substitution, we have race car driving, we have all these different things that, I kind of describe how an allostasis machine works in those contexts. So I think that's pretty good. So I guess I don't want to get into anything else right now. Oh, I did want to get into this is the allostasis machines paper. It's now on the PsyArchive. So I posted it after I submitted the camera-ready version of the workshop paper. I posted a differently formatted version. It's the same version as that, but it's differently formatted. And what we'll do with this is we'll update this with newer versions of sort of. I think Rashab is, like I said, is working on a version that maybe incorporates some reinforcement learning type approaches. So when that's done, I'll add him as an author, and we'll have a new version. So now I'm going to open the floor to Jesse or Krishna for updates. I guess Jesse can go first if he wants to share a screen or discuss. Are you there, Jesse?
Maybe I can go.
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Okay, yeah. The thing I'm working on currently for that, our lab is kind of incomplete now. I'm not able to complete it, so I'll just give you some vague idea to what I'm planning to do and I'm currently working. I remember I once sent you a message on Slack regarding you can say merger of deep learning and genomic sciences.
Yeah.
So okay, so these are two things that I would like to present. These are very vague general ideas. A lot of work is to be done right now. So I'm just thinking of doing something that is known as deep learning for life sciences. First, we have a deep chem named you can say library, and it's based on Python. More tentatively, it's based on top of the TensorFlow library. So what with the help of this library, what we can do, we can predict the toxicity of molecules, and this can be a great way. So we can where computer science students and biology and chemistry students come together, and we can have an interdiscipline thing here. And the second thing that I'm very much interested in, it's deep learning for genomics, and since it's DNA is at the heart of every living organization, so there is one thing known as transcripting factor. Transcripting factor or sequence specific DNA binding factor is a protein that controls the rate of transcription of genetic information from RNA to messenger from DNA to messenger RNA by binding to a specific DNA sequence. So we have a specific we have a data science data set that contains label to indicate whether a specific sequence you can call contains the gen binds or not. So with the help of deep learning, the thing that I'm currently working on, it's making convolution neural network that have deep neural networks that can you can say classify whether a given input that we are providing contains the gen binds or not. So currently I'm programming the thing. A lot of material is already available in the internet. So like the data set available, some of the code snippets are available. So I'm working on doing that. I'm working on to make that classifier, and once it gets done, then I'll put it in a writing form, and then I will come to the this deep chem thing for toxicity prediction. This thing I'm not currently I'm not coding for this right now. First I'll complete the genomic part, and then I'll complete this part, and then I'm thinking of putting in a nice blog post manner where we can not a very technical blog, just you can say some tutorial like snippets and some information that how people can use deep learning, other for main computer science stuff. Like it can be used for life sciences people also, and then we can also have like CT scan and X-ray images and work can be done upon them. Like the previous I worked on malaria detection and pneumonia thorax detection. So these are the things that that are not very how do I put it, very conventional use of machine learning, because nowadays whatever we are using machine learning, for example, for recommendation engines or image detection, or we can have use it for chatbots and something. All these are very commercial applications, but the part that machine learning is not very looked fondly in his life sciences. A lot of work is going on, but it's still, it has a lot of scope for research and development. And that's it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's yeah. We haven't talked too much about like bioinformatics in the group, this group, but yeah, that's a typical area. But that's not like exclusively deep learning and machine learning. They do use machine learning much more than deep learning, although it's changing. So yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities there. So this data set that you're working with, is this something that's a publicly available data set?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, you'll have to show us more about that in the coming weeks.
That's the thing. I just, I just made very vague slides. Maybe in coming weeks, I guess next week, I'll be putting much. I'll be organizing all my work, in an organized manner.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there was not much. There was data everywhere. We have a lot of data, but there was not very much labeled data. Like for example, 1-2 years back ago, especially in these fields. But now a lot of annotated data is being generated. So that's that's increasing the scope of deep learning in even the fields of study that it couldn't be done earlier. So yeah.
Yeah. Like we were just talking about with like labeled data and like cell biology or molecular biology, you often have a lot of annotations that are based on functional studies, but the functional studies, are not, they don't really do, they kind of can only go so far in terms of labeling the function. So you can't know every function, or if the function is, strong, has a strong or weak effect. That's never really included in the labels. So
yes.
Yeah. So, go ahead. Do you have something?
Yeah, I was saying that one of the, one more hurdle is like inconsistency of data, because there are chances that if for example we are making an classifier for gen binding and we get 1,000 cases of, you can say 1,000 data points that doesn't have the gen binding, but we get only 20 you can say 20 data points for the presence of gen binding. That would create a lot of disproportion. So the quality of data also matters, and the annotation should be consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people just work on like annotations research. Like there's a whole research area about like annotating data sets.
These are the real heroes of deep learning.
Yeah. So and we can also talk about this with respect to DevoWorm as well, because there are a lot of allied questions that cross over.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Krishna, for that update. So Jesse, it looks like you had to rejoin on another device.
Yes, and this connection is more stable, although honestly, I don't know how long it's going to last.
Okay.
But I'm here. Yeah, I'm in a big transition this week. I think I'm going to be on camera too. Let's see.
Right, there we go. Hey.
Hi.
Clean everything in the background. Yeah, I have, there's like a billion, what did we talk about earlier? Because there's a billion things that I could mention, and I want to make sure that I'm not like overkilling.
Oh no, well, I was just going through the Slack earlier, and we talked about, I really didn't talk too much about the conferences, but if you want to discuss that and your latest work, what are your, yeah.
Excuse me. I feel like I said this to my friend yesterday, and I said this to Bradley as well. I said, kind of like, wow, the space between last week and this week is very drastic for me. Like I just myself here. For those who don't know, I haven't been attention at the meetings recently. We didn't meet last week. I was at two conferences, and the lab was sort of, many people in the lab were at different parts of the different conferences too. But in essence, for me, that weekend was kind of a culmination of a lot of stuff that happened into last year, but then also specifically March for me was entirely research, lab work, development of ideas oriented. And it kind of came to a fruition with this, double booked, a lot's going on weekend where I was literally bouncing between conferences and trying to do like, I had like a panel of this, and then I had a presentation of that, and it was, and kind of like, it'd be great to have one time a discussion either in the lab or just in general, but like, some of those, I think both of the presentations I tailored a little bit more to the event, as I understood the event a bit more too, which is interesting and good, and something that I like to do sometimes, but not every time. But like to kind of have this sort of continued macro overview of stuff, I would say last weekend was just this huge, many things coming to fruition, and it was really interesting to get feedback, and feedback from outside the lab, feedback from people you don't know. And I would just continue to emphasize. I think one of the first things I said in the chat afterwards, and I'll see if I can find it here. One of the first things I said after all of this was, it basically was this commentary about, I'll share my screen quickly for this one. Yes. Here, I think you guys can see this.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, after writing application and writing my CV, this is kind of in the wake of DISI, the Diverse Intelligences application, I think some things are forming my mind, developing more, and regarding some of the work in messaging, and I think, I say in the second paragraph, it's a reminder to present and engage and share your stuff, and then you get it outside of your head, outside of your brain. And that's super, I can't emphasize it enough. And I'm really glad that Krishna is doing that a lot. Like every week there's stuff to present here, so I'm really happy that's from you specifically, because that like helps a lot. That helps everybody really. And I encourage all the members in the lab to do that. Like there are people today who might see this video and who are like considering joining the lab or almost joining the lab, and I have a lot of my friends who've been doing this or that, and I just can't emphasize enough how much that matters, and also sort of as someone who was sort of a non-traditional student and I wasn't originally a STEM student or anything like that. I think there's some anxiety or uneasiness about it, and that's just fine. That's quite normal. Why do I have a word here? Oh, sorry. But it's kind of like this, at least like in my reality for it, it's been, you have an environment, you have your lab, you do a lot of in-house presentations to kind of get familiarity and experience with stuff. And you work that regularly. And if you get used to that level, you know, you go through the demo or deploy loop. You go through your idea, you present it, you put it into something, an attempt at comprehensibility. You have other people in your lab who are very benevolent, see it, give you feedback, and so on. And like that's vital to growing. And there's also there's versions of this that are outside of academia too. Like one of the things that actually one of my suggestions for Envision for next year is to bring back the entrepreneur element to it. Like it's there, it's always there. But my first Envision was really interesting because they had something that I totally wasn't into at all at the time, which was like this sort of entrepreneurial. They did like a business pitch, like a pitch contest or something like that at the first Envision I was at. And I wasn't really that into it. Like, oh, I don't care about startups and I don't care about companies, and I don't actually know if I want to do that either. I'm looking at some things about that, but my point here is it's a highly transferable skill to talk about your stuff, and the people it's very much like kind of going to the gym or any other thing where you kind of just have to continue to do it, and you get better and better and better and better each time you do it, and also understand the different audiences and formats where you're talking, and that's why you can be business oriented, you can be like para-academic. Like this lab's a little bit para-academic, like in terms of what we do and how we do it. It's not this like heavy top-down infrastructure for stuff, in a way that some academic institutions are and some aren't. But I'm just kind of mentioning this is really for you as a developing agent of creating knowledge in the world. I think this is actually really important and really special. So continue to do that. And I would say honestly, and I've been saying this to many people, and I totally believe this myself, this lab is one of the best environments I've ever been across for actually getting people comfortable in that space. And a lot because of how Bradly runs things, so thank you, Bradly. But in general, I hope Bradly mentioned earlier about how things have changed since 2019, and they've definitely changed for me too. Side note, talking to Rob Stone now versus when I first joined the lab was whoa, totally different in my own experience. But I know Bradly mentioned the 2019 video in the update, and I haven't fully seen the update video yet because I've been super crazy, but really appreciate the video. And I hope that one thing that has stayed true or been expanded upon was the atmosphere of engagement and how open and welcoming it was, because that that matters a lot, and I'm very particular to this thing because as someone who's been on the cusp for a very long time, do I want to do this? Should I fit in here? Could I do this? Could I take myself seriously as someone who talks about research and how it impacts the future? Not a lot of people in my family did that. Not a lot of people around me did that. So I don't have an inherent background in that. And finding a community where you can do that has been really big. It's also why I like Envision so much. It's very much the same way, even if it's different. So that's kind of my big picture, Carl Sagan as an academic research guy, encouragement vibe message for today. And then I don't know what else we have planned for today. I know that's going to be papers, but I could go over a little bit of the conferences, some other things that have been up on my mind. But I don't know.
Yeah, we could do that for about 10 minutes, I think.
Okay. And then if there's any questions about what I said, let me know. I'm going to otherwise start that.
Okay.
Real quick, just for those who haven't seen it, I think I'll show a little bit of the. I don't think this is going to see too much here, but the Princeton Envision. This is basically what happened. You can kind of see this over here. Oops. Someone I'd highlight is Miguel. Miguel had a really, really cool time. Things were a little bit different this year than what I expected. But that's okay. Like, I think he did a really good job. I'm trying to find some interesting things to highlight. You can see over here, mine was the president, so with conversations about stuff. But the ethics panel, it started off with an ethics panel, which is really, 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 I think ethics was kind of the big draw for this time. And I, of course, mentioned Abelo Bihane, and superintelligence came up, and it was a really, really wide-ranging discussion. As maybe one of my highlights was the ethics panel. Obviously, I was giving a presentation on ethics the same day at a different conference, so that's probably why, but you know. There were a few networking sessions that went pretty well, and I kind of tried to just to get to know people there. A lot of people there this year were freshmen and underclassmen at Princeton University who'd heard before about it, but I think there was a major there were certain big groups of people who weren't able to show up this year, and so it was a little bit different in that sense. But I tried to kind of convey that as much as possible. Like I mentioned some of these little pictures were great. Like here's one of my favorite pictures that you guys probably remember. Phil Torres, who gave a talk on the left, me, Anson Lim, who is in our lab now, Angela, who's sort of in our lab and wants to come back and do more maybe at the end of this month. Anna Wang, who's a startup. She was 17-year-old here at the time, but she's doing a lot of really great startup stuff. Logan, who we talked about quite a bit, biotechnology guy, modeling, and now he's working on SARS-CoV-2 stuff at Conduit Computing, and they're doing a lot of great things. And then Avocado, who studied like math and philosophy and a lot of interesting research in that area. So this is sort of like legendary picture from 2019. And you know, Logan was happy to see it again. And this is actually the group shot. Liz Petrov was the director last year, so kind of the president type. And she was here this year, which is great to see. I think that's Anson up there on the table, actually, down here. But a lot of people, people always forget group shots. And I think one thing that missed from this year is that Envision had really bad PR, comparatively, and I say that with complete love. But like, I feel like I was doing more PR than anybody else, and I don't think that should be the case. So I think, I don't know if they were trying to kind of keep it a little bit quiet this year because of everything that's happening, but it's so great to have group shots like this because there's so much happening and it's really captured in one spot. So overall, it was great, a little bit different than usual. As I mentioned, Phil Torres did give a talk, which I found really, really good, but I don't have much material to show about it. There's a lot of active talk about having Envision in person 1 year from in April next year, which I would like to do because I've never been to Princeton. I've never really been, well, I think I went there one time for a different event, but I've never been to Princeton in April. Usually it's there like in the start of winter or in summer. So that's what that is. The New York Celebration of Women in Computing was really cool. I'll say a little more about that. I'll show the slides in a minute, but there's not much to show here. And a little bit of a nod to the Neuromatch Academy. I'm not going to show anything about this more than this specific thing, but lots going on there. I'm trying to volunteer with them somewhat. And just help what they're doing all along. So yeah. Also over here, I want to mention this too. The classic. Oh, I put that in our submissions thing too. But this art curriculum and emergence of innovation. I'd like to talk about that at some point, but not today. So as far as other things to talk about today, let me pull up quickly. I'll show you guys quickly. I don't know if you're going to get to see much of the slides that I made for anything. But just really quickly, I didn't put these in this chat. I don't know. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
This is what the final version of the slide looked like for Princeton Envision. And I kind of went through, it essentially ended up being, talking about mapping frontiers and the frontier map in general, some tools for the task, and then sort of my instantiation of it in cognition features. And I mentioned some more papers, and I mentioned Sonia Joseph. Like, you guys might remember me talking about this, but I really like, she's a former envisioner, and her comments are really speak to frontier maps as a quest of things, as a quest of trying to find some context for things. And I mentioned that here. Like, this is the core of a lot of my educational interests and outreach, is creating this stuff. And I made this case at Embodied Intelligence Workshop. This is the foundational thing in the A-Life submission. This is kind of, if this presentation was fully ready, I would like to show it to Rob Stone. And this is what I mentioned yesterday to him, but where is this context, and how could a more awareness of this context help us understand what spaces are available to kind of research more? I mentioned Distill and from Matt's library. I mentioned state-of-the-art AI very quickly, which I put that here before, and then frontier maps, and some things that we're doing there, and so on and so forth. A little bit about this, and try to kind of explain, sort of this is like, I mentioned stuff happening in our lab, just kind of draw some people to that. So thanks to everybody here, and this is me and Anson at Envision before. I mentioned the conference, and I mentioned everybody here, and I mentioned the whole lab too, and gave this here. So a little bit of promo work for that. I do want to mention this actually, because I didn't have time to do this, and it didn't quite fit. But I implanted a very specific joke that was relevant at the time, and is very relevant to us. And it's advice for researchers specifically like us. Even if you're fully vaccinated, the CDC still, by the way, still recommends finishing your current project before starting 12 new ones. And I instituted this script because I think it applies to some of us, including myself. So
yeah,
there you go. That's what that was about. This, really quickly go through this. You guys have pretty much already seen this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But this is the AI stuff. Thank you, Min, for showing up. I feel a little bit bad. I don't know if Bradley, you were at this talk or could see it, but Min showed up and was able to get into the conference, and I didn't know if anybody was going to have time to do it. But Min showed up, and a few minutes before the talk, was able to get in, and so we kind of revised some of the things on the fly So thank you so much for doing that. Where's the team picture? Min, that was really cool of you. And I'm sorry, I feel like I wish I gave her a little bit more structure because the timing things were a little bit off. And I feel responsible as the project lead for not having that in mind. But I really didn't know if she was going to be there. But she showed up and did a really good job talking about. She talked a lot about the. Her main thing was the ethics frameworks themselves, which originally I was going to kind of start off with a talk about Google ethics to kind of give us a contemporary backdrop and go into some specific details, but everything kind of got jumbled around because Min had such limited time. So we talked about ethics frameworks, and then we talked about Google, and then we went into some more details. And it wasn't ideal, but it was very good, and I think it was well received. People asked for what our slides, and it was a good talk about things. And so I'm trying to find the starting point of this really quickly. Yeah, so this is sort of two stories that we did here. Min talked a lot about ethics frameworks, which is good, and we kind of skipped to her topic, which was she talked about these slides quite a bit. We went to talk about going beyond sample bias maturity stuff. Went through those a little bit. We went to them, and we talked about Krishna's garbage in, garbage out stuff. Going beyond that, and how that related to like Sarah Brown's work, which I really liked her work and her perspective on things, and I kind of use this as a model for what to do in the future, like modeling bias in the world, understanding the fairness, fair machine learning interventions, and building tools that directly allow domain experts to interact with data and learning systems. And I think that fit with what Krishna was saying, and seeing Brown's work on it, flesh it out a bit more was good. Talked a little bit about AI accountability gap and other people from Jabru and Mitchell and others, kind of what they've been doing in creating audits and kind of inserting stuff into their own feedback loop, if you will. Critique of neutrality, which is behind this stuff, which I mentioned quite a bit already, and you guys already know about that. Fan of that. And some bigger questions were sort of hinted at. Moral law, moral theory, sustainability, 7th generation future design, who I didn't know at all, but this guy was actually at Princeton Envision. The guy who wrote the future design book, was at Princeton Envision and gave a talk about future design. So, unbeknownst to me, I'm patting myself on the back for referencing something I referenced things at both conferences unintentionally. So, how about that? Big questions. I mentioned Ruha. And I kind of drew a little bit upon this presentation I did before from ICLR and CSV after ethics talks at both of them, which is pretty cool. And I really had, this is like, way more slides than we have time for. I'm like in the 70s, and, that's fine. So I skipped through a bunch, but that's okay. This is really complete. There's been a lot of goodness in the slides, so I'm happy to kind of made it and did the full unabridged version and then made it abridged as available. A little bit of talk about AI ethics and safety. We didn't have time to get into that, but that's kind of a really important difference, if you will, or competing camps. A lot of other topical foci and further research that we didn't really talk about. Economy and politics, particularly policing, philosophy, law specifically, US versus China. Lots of things to just be aware of in there. And some conclusions here that kind of drew upon many different things. And a few more specific conclusions about people, like for those at the event. How do we have critical voices? How do we implement them? It's a big question right now. People don't really know the answer to that. A lot of people are just wondering what's going to happen to the people who leave in the Google team. Where are they going to go? How do we network and collaborate to build that? And the three-pronged approach that I mentioned from Brown about bias, machines, and domain experts getting in there. And then again, I thanked everybody here. And I thanked some other people too, but I took out that slide for the public version. I thanked Valeria and Ruha and Ramon, who indirectly inspired me for a lot of things here. And I'm going to plug the lab. So that's kind of what that was, and it went quite well. Again, imperfect, but sometimes a lot of thing about doing presentations is knowing how to tailor them and understanding that sometimes things are just going to happen and it's just not going to be perfect, but just keep talking about what you can and make the most of the time that you have and think about what you want to communicate rather than trying to read all the information that you wrote. And sometimes you have to just okay, this isn't going to work. You gotta do it this way or that way. So that's kind of what happened with that. There's been quite a few things that happened in the meantime. I really focused to my summer of data. That's still me, by the way. A quick plug for summer of data is a program. I put a big thread on Twitter. I'm going to try to be focusing on these things as much as I can this summer. I've made some progress already on this one.
Oh, yeah, they're not sharing your screen anymore.
Oh,
just so you know.
Whoops. All right, I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
I made a big tweet thread about this. I'm going to add to periodically, and I'm going to try to incorporate. I don't have anything initially to present today for this, and I know we have kind of limited time as it is because I was late. But I made progress on the Google Data Analytics certificate. This is going to start up in May because I had to kind of push one of the classes back. It's going to be quite intense, the MIT MicroMasters, but I'm kind of digging so far the fact that these are two totally different approaches to data right now. This is super industry oriented, as I kind of say in this stuff. Someone asked, I think Rashad or someone else asked me about them, and this is super get you into a data analyst job, and I may do that, but just to kind of get the different perspective, and even kind of understanding how Google talked about some stuff is kind of useful and interesting. And of course, Neuromatch Academy, that's happening. The applications are open. We really, 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 really need TAs. If you know anybody who wants to be a TA, please reach out to them. They will be paid.
I'm planning to, apply for TA in deep learning because for neuroscience I don't have much of experience in neuroscience. I'll be, instead learning it. But I think I can apply for a TA because I have been doing stuff in deep learning for more than 3 years, and I have roughly 4 years of experience in Python and Python libraries. So maybe I'll provide some help.
Yeah, that's great. And anybody you know that needs in deep learning or computational neuroscience, there's a big need for TAs, and they will be paid. So I really encourage outreach about that. TAs and then faculty project mentors, like Bradley was one last year, but we're looking for other people who would help with that too. And there's other ways to volunteer as well. Those aren't volunteer necessarily positions that you're a TA, you're getting paid, and that's great. But there are ways to help as well. Like Danielle reached out a few times about volunteering, and some other people that I know are interested in volunteering as well. So a lot of ways they can help with editing and social media and outreach, and I'm doing something like that stuff. But yeah, it's been quite a change of me to be focusing on. I was really cool. I wanted to show this. This is a Totoro Daruma doll with one eye filled in, and you fill in the eye when the task is done. And Totoro drew that on his stomach because Totoro would. That's pretty cute and amazing to see that. So, but they're for focusing on goals and stuff. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But it's been quite different this week to go from just research and presentation nonstop this weekend, and going from that to totally technical skill development has been good and interesting and different. And there are a lot more things I might like to present in the future about machine learning, deep learning, or data science related stuff. But we'll get there when we get there. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Any questions or comments, I guess?
Yeah, I like this summer of data thing that you're putting together. I think this is great. I think maybe we can even use this as a template for other people who want to get involved in like learning data science skills.
I'm trying to find ways to I wanted to make it somewhat inclusive and make kind of a lab component about it, but I also need to just for myself, I need to start ASAP this week.
Great.
Because everything is going the way it is, but I think there's ways to I'm trying to document my journey, and I'll make some formal things for it and try to make it inclusive and we can make some things within the lab for it to help it if you guys want to do that. So
yeah. Definitely. And then I was thinking, maybe we can talk about this more in the meetings too. If we want to, and I know, you're going to be learning new things and have new experiences. If you want to, include that as part of your weekly updates during the meetings, like we do during Neuromatch, where we focus on the Neuromatch experience, to have a little bit of that, just make sure that we keep up to date on that and get into that space. I think this would be valuable for a lot of people, not just yourself. So that's why I ask. And we've been discussing how to put that component into place. How do you get an education in something like data science without getting a formal master's? I think this is a good step.
Yeah, I think what Google's doing, and it's funny because one of my other friends is in Google and really enjoying some of their workshops. We're both criticizing them heavily for AI ethics. A little bit of mixed signal, but obviously, what Google's doing with their... I'm actually really like the certificate approach more than I thought I would, and find it to be way more holistic in developing a mindset. I said in one of the tweets in the thread, I don't know if it was on camera or not, but the epistemic humility, which I think is a wonderful term. I'm stealing that a little bit from Son Joseph's tweet. But I want to use that. The epistemic humility of what Google's doing and how they talk and set up the conference, or the certificate, is really cool. And I feel like for people who don't really know, there's a difference between data science and data analytics and data analysis. They're all different things. And I'm just learning what those are in Google's version of that. But having insight from Google about how they're training people to do data analysis is interesting on many levels. And being able to do that without being in a degree program right now is good. Obviously, I'm probably going to do a PhD one way or the other, and I'm getting closer and closer and closer to feeling like I know exactly what I want from that. But, with the way things are going, most people really won't need to do that unless they really want to. You can get very good careers with no degree at all.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit skeptical because I wasn't sure what to make of Google. I've heard good things, but so far I really like the program for being focused exactly, but not. There's enough human element to make it. I don't know if tenable is the right word, but it's not just, hey, here's the SQL you're going to need to learn to do the data polls and okay, great, and inquiries and it's all right, or how to do Excel sheet or R. There's a little bit more than that at first in how they're setting up. So I appreciate the care they put into the development of concepts. So that's my talk about that so far. We'll see how that changes over time. It'll be really critical next week. It's going to be really busy. It's going to be a super, super, super busy time for the summer. I'm not taking it easy this summer, but that's okay because there's a specific place I want to be in my career and in my research abilities. And I think if I do, the majority of what I set out to do, I'll be like way better than I've been. So
yeah,
there you go.
Very good. Krishna, did you have anything to add to that, or?
Nothing much to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think, we're definitely, Krishna, you should check out the TA ship opportunities with the deep learning version of Neuromatch. Definitely, participate in the neuroscience part. It's very good. And then we'll talk more about like volunteering opportunities in that because we'll do, like I said, we get involved in the Neuromatch sort of the curriculum. So we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Could I mention one more thing before I forget about it?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this, but didn't explicitly show up. Maybe we talked about this earlier when I wasn't around, but I did want to mention this. This call for abstracts for the Cultural Evolution Society conference. You mentioned this yourself a while ago, Bradley, I think.
Yeah.
And it's due the 30th, but it's only 250 words for an abstract.
Yeah.
And between some stuff that, like this, I may work as with Aaron or someone else, even just for this. But there's been a lot of. Oh, okay. So they're reading abstracts now, but they're closing on the 30th. So there's still time to do this, but I might check this out and try something like that just to see, but to be determined.
Yeah. So that's a good segue here. I was gonna let me share my screen here. So I was gonna.
That reminds me of one thing.
Yeah.
We were, I guess the previous time we were discussing that we can host a conference sometimes. Any thoughts on that?
Which one?
I guess in the previous meeting we were discussing that we can host a conference or Cognition Lab and host a conference.
Yeah, we can. I'm not sure how we want to set that up. I think the best way to do that is to kind of think of a topic and then we can put out a call or maybe invite people within the lab to give talks on it. So that's definitely something we can do. But we have to do some. Well, I guess we have to put out a formal call. We have to figure out what we want to do a conference on, and then get people involved. So I'm definitely still open to that.
Yeah, I want to ask a thing. For example, if we are calling for abstracts, then we will also, we would need to set up something with the journals, like with ACM or IEEE, so that they publish the work that is presenting in our conference.
Yeah. There are other, there are ways you can even do this with an overlay journal. I don't know if you know what that is, but basically you can do this on your own. You can put them on archive and then make an overlay journal. This might be a little bit easier than trying to coordinate with a formal venue. If we want to write shorter papers, because the more you ask of someone, the harder it is, the higher the bar is for them to say yes. So if you say write a 12-page paper, I don't have time for that. So, but I mean, we could do shorter things too. We could do 4 or 5 page papers and host them on a server, and then have an overlay journal, and then have this edition. So I mean, there are ways to do this. We can talk about this later in another meeting because I'd like to put a presentation together on it. But we can still keep our minds open about that. So let me share my screen. I was going to talk about the submissions, but I did want to get to this. Jesse brought it up about the Cultural Revolution abstract. So I've been working on 2 of them actually, and I need to finish these up and submit them. I actually worked on one for cognition futures, and this one is something that, this is something we can modify, or I don't think it's a really bad idea. It's just that so this builds on this conversation we were having about why do various scientific fields end up with the models and arguments that shape their historical trajectory. And so one unsatisfying answer is that each field has its own personalities and historical context, and then generating a larger potential number of potential trajectories in the process. By contrast, the notion that history essentially converges upon the same answer to the universality of certain truths also raises more questions than answers. And then, so to understand how these trajectories are formed and sustained over decades and even centuries, an agent-based model of intellectual cultural evolution will be proposed. At the level of individual agents, cultural evolution will be characterized using a dual inheritance model, mentor-mentee transmission, and peer-to-peer transmission. So you have like this sort of mentor-mentee, which is almost like a genealogy, and then peer-to-peer transmission, which is more like a viral transmission model, or like a cultural learning or social learning, So let me make a note there. And then this is a genealogical model here. So dual process model just means that you have two processes going on. So like for inheritance, if you think about like a gene culture coevolution model, you have a genetic genealogy that is, genes being passed on from parent to child and so on. And then you have this cultural model, which is where you can teach people. They don't have to be in your cohort. They could be like mentor to mentee. It could be peer-to-peer, as they call it, which is just, two people talking and so forth. It could be like broadcast to many people. So, that's something that we would highlight. We would also demonstrate a formal methodology for characterizing intellectual trajectories that combines phylogenetic approaches, which is this genealogical propagation, with a cybernetic model of epistemic regulation, which is the peer-to-peer propagation. So we'd be combining phylogenies, which we've talked about in the group as these trees, with a common ancestor, and then the cybernetic model, which is something more along the lines of like feedback and feedback loops. Common phylogenetic ancestors can diverge over time as subfields form and become linguistically isolated. Regulatory cycles resulting from peer-to-peer interaction can result in cycles in the phylogenetic tree, which is like where the tree reticulates. I cite this blog post where I talk about that a little bit, but we'll flesh that out a bit more in the... Maybe I need to flesh this out a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. I'm glad. That's obviously one of the things that I was kind of leaning towards. I appreciate you fleshing that out, and I'm excited to see it. And I'll look it over for sure. But I think it really captures a lot of good stuff there. So
yeah,
thank you for getting started with that.
Yeah, let me put this in the chat. I'd like to get this submitted. Well, I mean, we have to the 30th. Probably we can go up to the 30th. But yeah, I don't want to I don't want to go right up to the deadline. I know they're doing like, rolling acceptances, so I think our chances are maybe a little bit better if we do it as soon as possible. And I've left this because last week's been busy, last 2 weeks have been busy, so yeah, this just kind of like goes through, and I think this would be great. I think this would be a great next step for cognition futures. I guess the conference would allow us to flesh out some of this stuff and get some feedback from this audience, which is, where you're really kind of putting a formal model, you're putting flesh on the bones here. So that's that one. And then the MetaBrains one, which I need to work out a little bit more. So the CGS, I don't know if I'm even going to use the word MetaBrains here. It's just going to be too much confusion here. I might put cultural evolution instead. So this is this is about the contextual geometric structures work and how this fits into sort of the cultural evolution framework. So this is, CGS is a representations of cultural phenomena in a conceptual space. So a CGS kernel is essentially like some sort of very simple cultural representation. It's a representation of stimuli, but it's modeled in a way that gives it, like, there's some representational power there that allows you to model it as different cultures. So, like, you're interpreting, like, inputs, you're kind of putting it into a space, and the agent is sort of building classifications or representations, and those things have some, like, cultural context and meaning and things like that. That's the idea. That's the broader idea of CGS models. The implementation is actually much different. Like with a lot of computational models, you have a computational model and then you're trying to do something. So I need to work on this more, but I think this is, again, I wanted to put this in because I wanted to, sort of drive this forward in the context of cultural evolution. But I'll work on this a little bit more now that our allostasis machines paper is finished. Next thing. Oh yeah, go ahead.
That's really cool, both of them, and I wish Aaron was on the phone because Aaron would be interested in both of these. Maybe specifically the second one. And I think she has, she's not versed with any of the technical stuff, that, like, the specific things that we're talking about, but the ideas and the concepts are something that I think she'd really want to dive into. So I'll definitely show that to her, and I think this could be a really I really appreciate what you did this week, because I didn't have any time to do anything like that, and I think this could be. I think this could be, like, between this and kind of connecting to the past stuff with Sam's work and all the CGS stuff and stuff that we talked about, like my actual my sorry, I was distracted by something here. One of my Google Summer proposals was kind of along the lines of sort of cooperation and development and how certain things emerge and another take on social stuff, and cultural evolution and stuff like that. So there's a really strong theme of this in the lab, and I think this would be kind of a way to really kind of crystallize it and bring some people in who want to focus on that. And I'm excited about that, so
yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
Great. So next thing is the submissions. I wanted to go over these really quickly. So the allostasis machines materials are ready. The workshop is on May 15th. If you're not registered, that's fine. I'll recap. I'll be attending the workshop. And the workshop is basically the people discussing a lot of the submissions. People are gonna view things beforehand and then discuss them. We have the Artificial Life Conference. We'll hear back from that like next week, I think. And then, let's see. We have the Envision Conference is complete, and we have the Gibsonian information paper was submitted to CogSci. That was rejected from CogSci. They had a 22% acceptance rate, so, this one here, this is our Cultural Evolution Society submissions. That's due April 30th. We have the 2 abstracts, and if you want to add another abstract, go ahead and do it. But although I'm going to put this document that I just showed in the Slack, and we can wrap that up. As for the Gibsonian information paper, one word about that. Now that it's been rejected by CogSci, and I didn't expect it to be accepted actually, but I didn't know the acceptance rate was so exclusive. In any case, I wanted to open it up as a preprint, but before I do that, I want to add some things to it. So we might work out a little bit more detail on it before we put it out. That's why I haven't really put it into preprint form yet. There are a couple things I want to add in to it. Some things that, like, for example, that we mentioned at the EI workshop, and some other things. So that's what that's going to do. Society and ethics presentation, that's complete. Approaches to that's completed. That was the embodied intelligence workshop. This inverse generative social science workshop, that's I think been delayed till June, so I haven't heard much back from them on that. Application for interest groups, cognition futures, that was an idea that we had for CogSci as an interest group, not a paper. And the deadline for that is May 4th if you want to do that. I know that Jesse mentioned that there's a intriguing session at CogSci on conceptual blending in animals that I saw in the Slack.
Eric's looks pretty cool, and I please keep reminding me about that, because I keep forgetting about that, and I really want to try for something like that. I have to get started on that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Conceptual blending is interesting. We haven't mentioned that in the group, but that is really interesting work, and it actually is similar to the CGS thing. In fact, we could discuss that a little bit in the CGS submission.
That's the one for the symposium or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
That's still open to submit to, right? Or is that passed?
What do you mean symposium? Which one?
Like the CogSci discussion groups or whatever they're called.
Oh yeah. It looks like it's open into these interest groups. It looks like it's open until May 4th. So
okay.
It's coming up next couple weeks.
I really want to try to submit maybe one or two things of that, just because. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's needed here. If this is like a social group or if this is an individual-driven thing.
I think I'll actually ask Eric, because he's the person that I mentioned, and he's a really cool cognitive scientist at San Diego, and he would know. So I'm going to ask him. Okay. And but I just want I've officially lost internet right now at my place, so I'm on other stuff and managing like that, and people are moving out. And it's like, I don't want to write down the fact that, I want to look into this symposium thing too, or this discussion thing too. So I'm trying to make as many mental notes as I can as stuff is unfolding. So, yeah.
Okay. So, NeurIPS, of course, is coming up, the deadline for that. That it could be positive feedback in AI. That's Krishna's idea. If he wants to pursue that, the deadline is coming up in May. I
have one paper ready. Can you just you and Jesse can review it, please?
Yeah. If you want to put it in the Slack, actually, or yeah.
I've already shared it with you, but I'll upload it on Slack also.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah. It
needs some refining, but overall, it's I guess it's mostly done.
Okay. I'll take a look. And then we have a couple other conferences here. We don't really have things for them, but the deadlines. Dynamic walking is the deadline's almost for that. I don't know if we're going to get anywhere on that. But we have the open-ended workshop for AWiFE, lifelike computing systems for AWiFE. There's this ABM hub, agent-based modeling of human behavior, which is April 30th. So that's coming up. That was something. Krishna. All right, thank you. So this one, I'm not sure. This one is actually something I've totally kind of has fallen off my radar, but I want to go back to it because I think we might be able to submit something. I don't know what the deliverable is here, but I'll have to go back and look at it. There's a social learning and cultural evolution. I need to look at that too. I'm not really sure. Oh, wait a minute. Is that the right one? I don't remember. Let's see. Okay, that's that one. Then this is 49. So this is this one here. I'll put the red because that means it's like kind of the red zone on that. And then Dynamics Days Europe, that's May 31st. That's actually a complexity conference that I did last year, and I presented a poster there. And that might be something that you might be interested in for like dynamical systems type stuff. But that's a ways off. So those are our papers or submissions. And finally, I'd like to talk about our papers for the week. I know we're kind of dragging on this, but okay, you can still see my screen. I guess Krishna had to go, but let's get into it. So I'll talk. I have this set of papers I found on cultural universals, as we've been kind of, our theme today has kind of been cultural evolution. There's some interesting papers. I found this. I was looking through some things, and I found this interview with Michael Tomasello, who's a developmental psychologist and anthropologist. He was talking about a child's sense of fairness and explains why fair is not fair everywhere. And so this is, I think, it's just an interview with Tomasello on some of these issues. He was, he's done some, he's talking about some ethnography that's been done in different cultures where they, you have these egalitarian forager societies where they have a high degree of equality sort of built into the society. And then, some of the issues that you get from cross-cultural research, like the notion of possession. And so in some cultures, there's no such thing as possession, at least in the way we think about it. They just have a different mechanism for ownership and things like that. So, of course, fairness is going to vary as well. So, they kind of get into this. If you want to, learn a little bit about this and how this works, you might want to look at this interview. And this is an interesting take on it because, a lot of times when you approach it from a psychological point of view or like a cognitive science, I should say, because this is actually, he's a developmental psychologist, but like typical cog-sci approaches to this questions, or even in AI ethics, are very different from this. They kind of consider, fairness, and then, you have the academic agenda, and, sometimes you talk about language being a construct, but you don't really think about it in this sort of way where you're proposing, how it might be different in a different culture. He actually mentions Piaget here. Piaget was quite adamant that you don't get morality from adults. So, there's some interesting stuff in this. Then I found two papers here where they're arguing about cultural universals. The first is that there are no universals in the cultural evolution of kinship terminology. Kinship terminologies are the semantic systems of language that express kinship, and they find that there are no universals in the cultural evolution of kinship terminology. They look at kinship terminologies, vertically tracked language phylogeny in Austronesian, Bantu, and Uto-Aztecan languages. These are different linguistic families of different time depths and environments. We find no unidirectional universal models of evolution in kinship terminology. So they're actually looking. So there's this paper back in 1994 by Brown that proposes that there are these cultural universals. And I bring this paper up is because it's probably about almost 30 years old now. And it kind of lays out this framework for cultural universals. And the fact what I'm showing you now is that even today people don't really agree on whether or not they're actual universals. So, and even how universals are defined may be an open question. The Brown paper from 1994, they talk about universals as a, they kind of lay out some definitions, but definitely work like this shows that they're, universals, at least the way they're defined, typically don't exist for certain parts of culture. Now, I bring this up because there's another paper that came out recently that actually says that there are certain things about odor perception or olfactory perception that are shared across cultures. And so it doesn't necessarily make for a universal, but it's this sort of shared quality that we're kind of looking for if we want to identify a universal. So the abstract on this is human sensory experience varies across the globe. Nonetheless, all humans share sensory systems with a common anatomical blueprint. So now we have this system, this cognitive system that is more or less shared across humans. There's some variation in it, biological variation, but it doesn't necessarily track within cultures. It's dispersed. There's no real evidence that there are any, social groups or biological groups within humans that have significant variation in this system. So it's a system that we all share and is basically the same, except for, individual differences, which, may be manifest in cultures, but, we expect the representations maybe to be divergent. But what do we say? What can we say from a cultural standpoint? So the sensory experience varies across the globe, of course. Nonetheless, all humans share sensory systems with a common blueprint. In olfaction, it is unknown to what degree sensory perception, in particular the perception of odor pleasantness, is dictated by universal biological principles versus sculpted by culture. So now odor pleasantness is a different, it's a higher level representation. And of course, this is something that can be shaped by culture, but there's an underlying biological system that's going to sort of shape what this is. So in other words, if there's no biological variation, is there going to be cultural variation? Well, there could be, of course, because we have other things, we have other representations going on, we have other olfactory representations, we have other senses that are feeding into it. So that's the question they're asking. To address this issue, we asked 235 individuals from non-diverse, non-Western cultures to rank the hedonic value, which means the pleasure, relative pleasure, of a monomolecular odorants. So they gave them a bunch of smells, and they said, how's this smell? We observed substantial global consistency, with molecular identity explaining 41% of the variance in individual pleasantness rankings, while culture explained only 6%. These rankings were predicted by the physiochemical properties of out-of-sample molecules and out-of-sample pleasantness ratings given by a separate group of industrialized Western urbanites, indicating human olfactory perception is strongly constrained by universal principles. So out-of-sample molecules and out-of-sample pleasantness ratings. This just means that it was a different sample of people that they normalized this to see if there was you would have all these different cultures. You would expect there to be, some differences or similarities, but you also have this control of industrialized Western urbanites. So they found basically that it's more or less convergent, that there isn't a lot of difference. So say, for example, fermented herring, which is something that is probably not, I wouldn't think of as pleasant, right? I mean, is that subjective on my part, or is that something that everyone finds to be odoriferous and offensive? Fermented herring, for example, emits a smell described as the most repulsive in the world, but is a greatly appreciated delicacy in Sweden. At the same time, odor valence is considered to be the principal perceptual dimension by which odors are categorized and can be objectively predicted by chemical structure. It is unclear how to reconcile these perspectives. Is odor preference entirely culturally relative, or is it universally constrained by molecular structure? To address this, we designed a study to disentangle this influence, or these influences. So this is the idea here. They've got some cultures from Southeast Asia, from South America, from North America, and they show that there's a lot of convergence here. That, and the thing is of course, is that if something's a delicacy, it doesn't mean that it's, we eat a lot of things that maybe are, offensive in another context, but we would eat them anyways. Kind of it's kind of a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around, and certainly the testing this in an experiment is difficult, because there's a lot of context that you're trying to cut through. But yeah, so this is this paper here, which is, I think, a very good paper for if you're interested in cultural universals. It kind of goes through, and these two papers here kind of, they're different systems, but they kind of give you an idea of what you're looking for in terms of this idea of finding universals and really kind of testing those hypotheses. So, okay. So that's the cultural universal stuff. Then I forgot that yesterday we talked with Jesse, Rob Stone, and I talked about this paper, The Foundations of Control and Cognition, the Evergood Regulator Theorem. And this is something that Rob and I put out in 2015 on ResearchGate. And it's interesting because it's something that we talked about quite extensively. He likes this idea of the Evergood Regulator Theorem, and he has some pretty good ideas. I was actually listening to this. He sent me a recording of his talk. He gave a talk on this like around the same time, and it's really interesting, some of the things that he has. I made some notes on it here locally. I can share them with Jesse, and I don't know if he got an email. He got the email with the recording in it as an attachment.
I don't think I did, but I didn't check my email like extensively.
Okay.
But yeah, if you could send it to me, that would be good.
Yeah, I will. So I made a number of notes here, and he raised a lot of interesting points. So he, like, for example, he brings up the idea that there were a bunch of problems that led up to cybernetics. So, like, cybernetics didn't just happen in a vacuum. It happened because there were a lot of things in science that were kind of converging upon the development of cybernetics. So you have this issue of cause and effect and the breakdown of cause and effect. So there's a causality aspect to cybernetics. There's this idea of chains of events versus a web of events, and then you have different types of things, like second order cybernetics. There's a very heavy emphasis on the role of the observer, and so the observer is important. We've talked about this in other ways, and I think that's something to consider. That I know, like, people think of this as like, sort of almost like a quantum physics question, but you have this observer, the role of the observer on the system. And then that's kind of gone off into like a lot of philosophy. But I think there's like also another path, which is where you have the second order cybernetics and really thinking about it in terms of like agent-based modeling and things like that, where you have the role of the observer and these relationships between the observer and the system, but then also having a model where you can put out basically it's testable in the world. And so this is the kind of thing I think might be interesting. Then he talks about the law of requisite variety in the Evergood Regulator Theorem, which is what this paper is about. And so it's really, it needs to be a little bit longer. This is what so Rob writes in a style that involves a lot of footnotes. So this paper, actually the core of the paper is like 4 pages, but it's like there are a lot of notes here, and kind of gets into some of these things where if we really wanted to do this, we could put the notes into the paper, but some of these notes, of course, are just citations. So this is something where if we wanted to refashion this paper for something that would maybe be published in a journal, we could do so. There are definitions here. I think there's maybe room in this paper for developing maybe like either a more formal, like a formalization of this, or like maybe a model system or something. That there's something missing here and I can't figure out what it is. It kind of goes in a lot of different directions. So putting that aside, how can we kind of synthesize some of the core ideas and maybe put I said implementation, and Rob was a little not really receptive to that idea. But like, you know, what could we do to improve his paper? That's what I'm asking.
I haven't looked at it. I haven't significantly looked at it in over a year, maybe. But I feel like one thing that may steer it a bit, is that was actually not intentional, but go for it. Is creating a very clear what question that you want to answer, and then solution to it. Actually, I have to take a phone call right now, so hold on.
Okay, while we wait, okay, all right, so we have some. Krishna says he had to go. Thank you for attending, Krishna. I just wanted to go to the chat. And so that's this paper, and I guess Jesse will be back to mention what he thinks about it. So asking a pretty clear question I think is good. And then getting into some of this. Like I said, this goes in a lot of different directions. We talk about game theory, for example, or at least a little bit about, tit for tat and the prisoner's dilemma. So that's another theme. Jesse, you're back.
Yeah, stuff about internet. I think I was basically saying having a specific question and then our solution or response to the question might help. And I don't know, I don't really know that fits what we have. Or that there's a question we have, I don't really remember. But I do remember it being like, hey, here's a bunch of ideas. But creating some kind of unifying, something to unify them, and even if it's, like, I'm trying to think about it in the sense of the context, content, conclusion format. So I don't know how that would, what can we add to it? And also, is there a specific page limit? I forgot what we're submitting this to and how big or little it has to be.
Well, I think if we were to submit it to like a history or philosophy venue, which I think is what Rob's intention was, at least originally, there aren't really hard page limits for them, so they can go on for a while. So I don't think at this point, and I mean it's not very long now, so we have quite a bit of room to work. I think it can't be more than like 4,000 words. So that and then we have a lot of good references, but I don't know. There are themes we can pick up. I think the best way to do this is like there are themes we can pick up on, and then just say this is our sort of question we want to answer from some of these themes. We'll just pick a couple themes and put something together. So you can go kind of off in different directions, but then to have like this set of themes and say, okay, now we're going to address this core set of themes, and then it's it gets you. I guess you could have both ways.
I think also, I think you mentioned history of ideas journal. I'd like to look at that just to see what the articles are like, because that would probably help give some context for how, not necessarily we have to use that journal, but just sort of what something to compare to.
Yeah. All right, so I guess. So I guess for today, I want to kind of wrap things up. I'm trying to think of what to cover. So I think I will cover one more paper, and that is this paper on slowing. This is something I think this from this week. This is from eLife Journal. Slowing the body slows down time. This is about perception, time perception. So this is something that came out recently, and the abstract is on something called interval timing, which we haven't talked about in this group, but is an interesting topic. So interval timing is a fundamental component of action and is susceptible to motor-related temporal distortions. Previous studies have shown that concurrent movement biases temporal estimates, but have primarily considered self-modulated movement only. So interval timing is about this like keeping track of time in your brain. Like, so, you know, if you have like you can basically keep time. You can like figure out the length of like say 2 hours or the length of like 2 weeks, and you kind of have this interval timing. Sometimes it's even like as simple as if you're walking down the street, knowing like that there's a certain timing to your movement, or there's a timing to certain things like music, that sense of time. And so this is something that's part of perception and action, in that perception action loop. So it's important to understand this mechanism. And there are a number of reviews on this interval timing idea, which I'm not going to talk about today, but it's something that we can talk about in future meetings. So they talk about this. However, real-world encounters often include situations in which movement is restricted or perturbed by environmental factors. In the following experiments, we introduced viscous movement environments to externally modulate movement and investigated the resulting effects on temporal perception. So they're almost like doing this sort of virtual reality experiment where they're modifying the environment and they're looking at like how that modulates movement. So if you're just moving in the environment that you're used to, your interval timing works. But if you introduce this sort of viscous environment or this environmental perturbation, then it can screw up your interval timing. It'll modify it. This is actually something I should have cited in the allostasis machines paper, but we can cite this in the next version of it, because it has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with that sort of dynamical perturbations and how it distorts performance. So in 2 separate tasks, participants timed auditory intervals while moving a robotic arm that randomly applied 4 levels of viscosity. So they're moving an arm, there's this viscosity that they're pushing against, and it affects their control of the movement. And this has to do, we actually did put a part in the allostasis machines paper about tool use and how tools can be incorporated into the body schema, or the sense of where the body is in space. And so this is actually something interesting with respect to this as well. The results demonstrated that the higher viscosities led to shorter perceived durations. So that means that they thought that they were, when they moved something in higher viscosity, they didn't think it was like, they hadn't moved it as like over the amount of time they thought that they'd moved it shrunk down. So that can affect your actual performance on something. Using a drift diffusion model and a Bayesian observer model, we confirmed that these biasing effects rose from perceptual mechanisms instead of biases in decision making. So this is again this perceptual illusion that you see in virtual reality, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, so we may want to revisit that next week. These findings suggest that the environmental perturbations are an important factor in movement-related temporal distortions and enhance current understanding of the interactions of motor activity and cognitive processes. So this is like a lot of the interval timing work has been done on motor control, and that's a good model system for this, because you have this this natural timing with respect to the cerebellum. The cerebellum is controlling a lot of the timing of your movement. And, a lot of this stuff is, at least you perceive it as automatic, but it's actually something that if you have, like, say, damage to your cerebellum, your movement timing can be off. You can have tremors, or you can have some sort of, like, motor control problems. So this is, we know that sort of the neural substrate of this. Biologically relevant behaviors often require precise calibration and execution of timed outputs on multiple levels of organization in the nervous system. Central pattern generators produce basic locomotion in many organisms and yield balanced rhythmic motor output via the oscillatory properties of inhibitory neurons. So inhibitory interneurons, there are a whole host of neurons that control this timing. There's, selective inhibition, selective excitation, and there are whole circuits that control this. So at greater levels of complexity, many behaviors rely on the explicit awareness of time. So subjective time is something that plays into this as well. And so this is subject to distortion because of all the complex sort of representations and neural circuits at play. So these all can be distorted by changes in perception, attention, and memory. So this is a wonderful system to probe, and it gets into these ideas that we've been talking about with virtual environments and perturbing performance and things like that. So I don't know if there are any good figures here. Here's a nice figure showing the apparatus that they're using. So they're controlling a robot with an manipulandum arm, and they're looking at these different resistive forces that are being introduced. So the robotic arm is, operating in resistive forces that are varied, and then that varies the perception of time as the arm is moving. So how long does it take to move the arm a certain distance? And that's the thing that's being distorted here. So I mean, this is a pretty technical paper, but I think it raises a lot of interesting questions, and their data look interesting. I haven't gone through a lot of this. They do something called drift diffusion modeling, so they're looking at sort of the drift in this timing interval perception. So this is nice analysis of the data. And they do this thing called temporal reduction, so they're kind of looking at the trace here of movement. So they're looking at movement over this time, and they're looking at how the movement's distorted and how it changes. So I think that's an interesting paper. They use a Bayesian observer model, which I'm not really familiar with, but it's a Bayesian model, so there you go. I think I think in this group we understand at least the basics of the logic there. Okay, so I think that's enough for today. I think, and so in future movement timing experiments, it may be fitting to look beyond simple movement parameters and focus on higher order parameters such as biological versus non-biological motion. Specialized detection systems in the brain can identify movement from other organisms that adhere to physical principles such as natural acceleration and deceleration. And this actually fits into the Gibsonian information, because we talk about biological motion and how that's information that we're extracting from the environment as direct perception. So that's something that might be an interesting thing to follow up on there as well. So that's enough for today. I did want to go over that paper, and we started about 10 minutes late. So to wrap up, Jesse, do you have anything to say?
No, other than sorry for my delays here. Hopefully I'm going to have my internet sorted out by the time next step happens. I'm going to need that. And the papers were good, and I already sent a message to Erin, because we were basically thinking of her in spirit, and I hope she can join on some of those things. Papers, I know she mentioned some of the morality thing too, and also the cultural stuff. And as far as concluding thoughts, I'm really looking forward to the summer again. A lot of different fronts, and I think there's there are some people who I'm still, there are people who are sort of like on the fence about wanting to do more with the lab. And again, as a reminder, Angela is doing some interesting things in the realms of she's doing some interesting things that are related to stuff in the lab. Another person who is on the verge of like sending you their resume and stuff is in kind of on the border, on the cusp of things. Erin's interested in doing stuff, but she's had this has been a busy week for her with school. And some other people, like, who was it in the chat? Zuro, I think?
Yeah.
I know he wanted to do some things regarding like reinforcement learning and some other projects we've been having, and Neuromatch and stuff like that too. So there's a lot of like
new stuff developing. I know Chris has been doing a lot of things, and I know everybody's going to be kind of focusing on Google Summer of Code in the other lab when that comes through. But then it will be, other stuff will be kind of coming to fruition when that comes, and we'll see what happens with that. So, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's sort of coming over the fold, and that's good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for attending, and see everyone on Slack or some other meeting if we have it during the week, because we've had last couple weeks we've had meetings during the week. But
yeah, let's keep in touch with those other meetings too, like Cybernetics things or what Rashad wanted to do. And I know Rashad has a lot of things he's working on, and I hope we get to continue talking about that and him fleshing it out. So
okay.
I'll leave it at that and say I hope everyone has a good week ahead.
Yeah. See everyone next week.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.